In this series, I provide brief comments on research that I've read recently. I make no promises to get everything right and certainly leave a lot out. My hope is that the series will spark your interest so that you look some of these papers up. Today, we'll look at a paper by Fegley and Israel from the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics' Summer 2020 issue. The paper's title, The Disutility of Labor. We'll consider this paper in two parts. First, the definition of the utility of labor, then the unnecessity of the assumption of the disutility of labor. First, we need to lay out some definitions that Fegley and Israel use in this paper. First, labor is defined as the employment of physiological functions and manifestations of human life as a means. This definition of labor captures not just paid labor, but any time you're expending time or effort doing something to achieve a goal, rather than just for its own enjoyment. Second, leisure is defined as not labor, or more precisely, the employment of physiological functions and manifestations of human life as an end. In effect, leisure is its own reward. Importantly, the distinction between labor and leisure is inherently subjective. People may sing because they just want to sing, or they may sing for their supper. With these definitions in mind, Fegley and Israel point out that there are really two uses of the phrase disutility of labor that one finds in Austrian economics, specifically citing Mises and Rothbard. On the one hand, the disutility of labor is simply the fact that when you're laboring, you're giving up leisure. That is, disutility of labor is just another name for the fact that labor has an opportunity cost. However, there's another conception that gets bound up in this, and that is that labor is considered undesirable in itself. It causes some form of discomfort that people would try to avoid. Fegley and Israel suggest that the common view, specifically suggested by Mises and Rothbard, is that the disutility of labor is a fundamentally empirical fact. It's something we just observe, rather than being arrived at by deduction. Fegley and Israel also suggest that according to Mises and Rothbard, without this disutility, people would work as much as they possibly could. Fegley and Israel suggest an alternative. They suggest that disutility as some kind of discomfort or other unpleasantness is an unnecessary assumption. Rather, all that is necessary is disutility as another term for opportunity cost. And this opportunity cost is a logical, a priori fact, not just an empirical one. In short, because action always implies choosing, the choice to use human time and effort as means implies giving up using the same as an end instead. So in reality, labor has a utility, even if it is imputed from the eventual consumption that labor makes possible. So, like anything else with utility, the utility of labor would be expected to diminish the more you work, so that people wouldn't actually work as much as possible. Eventually, the marginal benefit of another hour of work is less than the marginal benefit of an hour of leisure, so labor stops and leisure begins. A final observation they make is about the nature of leisure and its relationship to consumption. They point out that in reality, consumption takes time, just like production does. So if one is to consume at all, then leisure is absolutely necessary. This conception creates a nice parallel between labor and leisure, with labor being time devoted to production, while leisure is time devoted to enjoying consumption. I'm going to limit my thoughts here for a simple reason. Fegley and Israel's paper has a comment from Joe Salerno, and then they responded to that comment. So I suspect there's a lot more in that discussion than was in this paper alone. But I can't help but provide some brief comments. First, as a matter of criticism, I'm not sure that Fegley and Israel convinced me why this quibble matters. Suppose that they are right. What does that change? I have some guesses, but it would have been nice to see Fegley and Israel's own thoughts on this. That said, I am sympathetic to the idea that the disutility of labor is an unnecessary concept. I think they're basically right that diminishing marginal returns to labor, plus the consumptive nature of leisure, solves the puzzle of why people just don't work all the time. I look forward to reading the rest of this conversation between Fegley and Israel on the one side and Salerno on the other, and am hopeful that it may bring out some of the answers about why the assumption of unpleasantness of labor actually makes any difference one way or the other.